Hey everybody, welcome back to Road to 1000 Dueling Book Rating Season 2. So, we are playing in Master Rule 5, effective April 1st, and this is the first day of the Master Rule, although I probably will be uploading this probably on the 6th of April. So, we have played against, here I'll show you, we're playing against Gren Maju, and we are playing Paleo Frog. So I know, with the toad limits, this deck kind of struggles. In fact, it struggles a lot. However, with one toad, in fact, I might show you later, probably in like a later video, if we get enough attention on this, I guess. So I mean, comment below and leave a like if you definitely want to see this combo on what you can do with Paleo Frog still with one toad. I'll definitely show like something that you can do with just Swap Frog on a water. It's still pretty broken, especially in Master Rule 5. You can do lots of stuff, so I've just kind of like been brainstorming around it. I mean, definitely it still sucks because Toad is limited, obviously, but you can still shuffle back Toad with its own effects. I mean, it's not terrible, but it definitely does lose you some advantage and some games that you would obviously win in that respect. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I believe that he starts us off. And so he starts us off with a Pot of Desires, banishing 10 cards. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the play button here. And he goes ahead and he draws into a copy of Solemn Judgment and Didi Crow. In fact, I'm going to turn down my volume a little bit, so there you go. So it's not too loud. Looks like the sound's a little bit off. Okay, it just fixed. I don't know which cards he just drew into. I think it was a Judgment and a Crow, but I'm not too sure about that. So he sets the Crackdown, Judgment, and the Evenly here. Oh no, sorry, the Super Poly here. And he passes it to me. So I start off with a Swap Frog, which he's going to hit with a Crackdown. That's fine. I wasn't going to be using the Swap Frog for much anything else anyways. So I go ahead and set the Crackdown, the Waking, Spiritual Swords, as well as Trap Trick, and pass my turn back to him. He draws into another Lightning Storm, and he goes ahead and, in the standby phase, which is this is a dumb play, he uses Didi Crow targeting my Ronin. Don't do this. Wait for me to use the Ronin effect, or wait for me to go ahead and like activate a trap card, Chain of Paleo. Then you can use the Didi Crow. Like, don't just shotgun the Didi Crow. That was a bad move on his part. So I go ahead and I activate Trap Trick in the end phase. I banish the Olenoides, set the Olenoides, and I figure at this point I can hit one of the back rows. So I hit a Super Poly, which is the worst of the two. Obviously, it's a dead card, but it does get a Paleo in my graveyard, so I can go ahead and activate the Crackdown, and he's going to let it go through, which allows me to chain my Olenoides, and then from here I can get I can go ahead and make a Toad. So this is great. He probably should have Judgmented my Crackdown, so then he would have kept the Swap Frog, but whatever. So Toad's going to get negated by the Solemn Judgment anyways, and then I'm going to use the Toad effect to go ahead and add it back to my extra deck. So he thinks that Crackdown actually destroys itself here because he thinks this, when the monster leaves the field, destroy this card. Swap Frog never left the field. It was used as Xyz material, but he didn't understand that for some reason. So we called the judge over that, so I'll try and get the... I'll get past that really quick. There's just a lot of messages in the chat. But finally he just accepts it and says whatever. So the judge tells him otherwise, you know. So he just goes ahead and sets evenly matched and passes his turn. If he would have normaled the Gren Maju, it would have been kind of rough, but at the same time I could have just Spiritual Swords and then just negated the attack and get an Olenoides, and then I'd be in the same place. So it didn't really matter. Swap Frog's going to come down and then give me a Ronin, and then I'm going to use the Ronin to go ahead and banish the other Swap Frog, special itself back. And so this would have been why the judgmenting on the Crackdown would have been more important, because he would have been controlling the Swap Frog, so I wouldn't have been able to even make this play in general. So I go for another Toad because, or the same Toad, the one good boy, back in the extra deck. And we go ahead and hit him for 2,200, leaving him down to 1,800 life points. And we go ahead and we pass our turn to him. Next, he goes ahead and draws for turn. We activate Toad's effect, special summoning Dupe Frog to the field. Then he goes ahead and special summons Gizmekarochi, which I let go through because he can only target Dupe Frog for attacks at this point, so I say that's fine. Even if he gets another monster on field, I can activate Spiritual Swords and then just keep negating attacks anyways. So Spiritual Swords is actually a fantastic card, and I kind of want to play more copies of it, but yeah. He goes ahead and normal summons Gren Maju, and its attack is chonkin', bro. I think he's at like 60... I think maybe he's 7200, I think. So Gizmekarochi is going to kill my Dupe Frog. And then I use the Dupe Frog's effect to go ahead and add the Swap Frog from the grave. The reason I add the one from the graveyard is because I only have one copy left in deck. And so on my following turn, I can just use Toad's effect to special the one from the deck. And it's going to get me more advantage. So we go ahead and activate the Spiritual Swords here, negating the attack. He lets it go through, which I chain the Olenoides, and he passes his turn. In the standby phase, Toad's effect, special summon Swap Frog, use Swap, send Dupe, and then in the main phase, we can go ahead and use Pot of Desires. So these are some crazy plays that you can do here. Now that the Toad's on it's my turn after the Toad's effect has resolved. There's lots of stuff here, so let's see what we can do. So I believe here I overlay Swap Frog and Olenoides into a copy of Opabina, and then I can use the Opabina to go ahead and search for a Dynamiscus. I have so many cards in my hand at this point, it doesn't really matter, so I just use the Dynamiscus to banish the Gren Maju, and I can chain the Olenoides, and I discard the Pot of Desires out of my hand. Then I can use Ronin's effect in the grave to special summon it by banishing the Dupe Frog. And then I believe here I link these off into a copy of Nightmare Phoenix to get rid of the last back row, just in case if it was something important. And then I use the Ronin again, banishing the Swap Frog, and then I can normal summon my Swap Frog. And at this point, I have a lot of options. I could link off into Boral Sword, and I could just kill him there. Obviously, he's at 1800 life points, so that's like kind of unnecessary. But I just go ahead and I go into a Unicorn just to play it safe. So yeah. Then he goes ahead and scoops that game up. So we go into game number 2. So looks like we sided in the Inspector borders because they're fantastic, and he decided to go first, which was a weird choice, but I let that happen. I said whatever. I think it would have been better for him to just side in the Even Leads and the Lightning Storms and the Cosmics, obviously the Cosmic in his hand, and then just choose to go second, but for some reason he didn't do that. So he is, there can be only one Waking the Dragon and Solemn here, and the Cyclone. So we go with our turn, and we go ahead with a Pot of Desires to draw some extra cards. And then we can go ahead and just normal our Swap Frog, which he's going to chain there can only be one to it. That doesn't matter. So then we're good here. He likes to shotgun these for some reason. Don't do that. Wait for me to commit, like try to commit to a second play, right? Like, if there's two monsters on the field, that's when you should flip. There can be only one. Or like if I use Ronin, banish a swap or banish a frog, then you chain. There can only be one, because at that point I have to send one to the grave. Or if I have an aqua on the field already, I can't summon another one there due to there can only be one. So he likes to shotgun this. Don't do that. That's a really bad thing to do here. So I just go ahead and set 5 and pass my turn. So he draws the Waking the Dragon for his turn and hits me for 2450, and then it was going to be 2450, but I just decided to go for a Lost Wind to cut in half. And then in the end phase, I go ahead and hit the Cosmic with my Olenoides, which he chains to banish my Canadia. That's fine. I don't want to chain Canadia here because it would just reset the Gizmek's stats, so I don't want to do that. It's half permanently anyways. And then I go ahead and I activate Paleozoic Morella, special summoning back the Olenoides, and I can send Spiritual Swords to the grave. And then still in the end phase, I can use a Heavy Storm, and I targeted the Waking the Dragon as well as there can only be one, and he negates it with Judgment. So I don't know if that's the right play. I mean, Waking the Dragon's super solid. I think I probably would have just let that go through, sat on like the Raidraptor Ultimate Falcon, and then like that plus the Judgment to back it up is like super solid. So I think that was a really bad choice on his part. I didn't even notice he had that set until just now. But Yeah, we just go ahead and we decide to go for an Inspector Border, because at this point, the Gizmek's cut in half, so if we hit it with the Inspector Border, he can't use the Gizmek to bring itself back, because there won't be any other card types on the field, so he won't be able to bring it back at all, so we just hit it really hard for, I think, 775. I know life points are really, really awkward this game, but that's okay. So he goes down to 1525, and we pass my turn over to him. So it's all down to this draw for him. Fortunately for him, he draws into Inspector Border. So at this point, he can go ahead and use the Inspector Border to either kill the Olenoides or kill the Inspector Border. He chooses to kill the Inspector Border, which I think is the smarter choice here, because they're going to crash, and then he can use the Gizmek Orochi, banishing 8 cards, and then he can hit my Olenoides. So it clears my entire field. So I think that is the better choice here. So that is a smart move on his part. And I do have to play around this there can only be one as well, so it's really rough. But we go ahead and we set our Dupe Frog as well as our Morella and pass our turn to him. Honestly, I wish I would play, what's the card? Link Spider. I didn't play Link Spider in my extra deck thinking because it's Master Rule 5, but now I really want to play it just because There Can Only Be One is a very, very good card, right? So what I could do is I could summon back any Paleo, link it off for Link Spider, which is a Cyberse monster, so I'm still playing around There Can Only Be One, and then I can link the Cyberse as well as a Frog or another Paleo off into Phoenix, and then I can pop that There Can Only Be One. And at that point, I'm free to play as much as I want. So I think that that's definitely an option for the future. I definitely need to put a Link Spider in the extra deck to play around that. I didn't really think that it'd be important, but in this duel, it made me kind of see that it is important, especially because the extra deck is kind of loose right now. You can play lots of stuff and get away with it. So he goes ahead and special summons the Eater of Million, banishing 5 cards from his extra deck. And he goes ahead in the battle phase and banishes my Dupe Frog, which is rough because I did not see that coming. So, yeah, it's pretty rough. But I take the 2450 and he passes his turn back to me. So I go ahead and I set the Solemn Judgment and pass my turn. So the reason I do this instead of committing any cards to the board is because I do have the Spiritual Swords of the Graveyard that I can banish, and then he can't attack me directly. So I'm going to basically be surviving for an extra turn. So he goes ahead and attacks with Gizmek for game, or trying to attack for game with these two, and then I just chain these, or use the Spiritual Swords so he can't declare an attack directly, and he passes to me. On my turn, I draw the Olenoides, which is the out to There Can Be Only One. So I go ahead and set that card and pass my turn. He draws into a Crackdown, and he attempts to attack for game, which I use Morella, chain the Morella in the graveyard to chunk block, as well as send Canadia, because Canadia is useless. And then he's going to go ahead and destroy or banish my attack, and then it gets banished due to its own effect. And then I probably should have actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have just taken the 2450, just because life points are kind of a resource here, right? So realistically, I should have taken the 2450, bringing myself down to it's a weird number, 625, because the Eater of Millions is actually at, I believe I banished 11, he is 21, so it should be at 3200, so this could have attacked for game. So realistically, I should have taken the 2450 and just kept an extra body, but what I do instead is I Olenoides and then I summon back the Morella. So this was a dumb choice, realistically, because I would have had the Morella on the field. If I did it that way, I would have had 650 less life points, so that would have been better on my part, because then I could have probably gone into a different play here. But instead, I think I go into Toad. I think it would have been better for me to go into the 2450 guy. What is his name? I can't think of his name right now for some reason. Can't think of it. I'm not sure why. Anomalakaris, that's right. And then I could have banned or killed the Eater of Millions. Obviously, he probably would have used the Crackdown, but then I would have changed the Judgment. So I would have been at 313 life points or something like that. But anyways, I'm going to summon back the Ronin Toad in here. Then he's going to go ahead and activate Crackdown, which is perfectly fine because I'm just going to chain a Paleo and then I have the same amount on the field anyways. So the Crackdown literally does nothing here in this case. So then I'm just going to overlay into a Toad, and then I can use the Toad to hit the Swap Frog. So I think it definitely would have been better for me to go into the Anomalocaris, especially because I could use the Anomalocaris to pop the Eater of Millions, and then I could use it to attack into this, and that would have been 1400 life points, leaving him down to 125. Then on his turn, he probably would have summoned the Gren Maju. I would have negated it, and then let's see. Then the Gizmek attacks the Anomalocaris. I pop it. He specials it back. I'll take 50 life points, and it'll be back to me. But anyways, that's just like something I would have thought of, and then I could have like obviously used the trap trick that's set here as well. Then we pass our turn. He draws into an Extravagance. He goes ahead and activates it, which we go ahead and use our Toad to negate because our life points are pretty low anyways. Toad's just kind of chunk blocking here. And also, I couldn't have summoned anything off Toad's effect. That's why I didn't use the effect, because I didn't have any targets. I only had a Ronin left in deck, I believe. Toad's going to send itself back into the extra deck, which I don't know if that's also the right play, just because... Yeah, I'm not too sure. Judgment's going to come down on this Garen Maju, obviously. And then he's going to attempt to attack for game. We chain the Trap Trick. And unfortunately, the only target left in our deck is Dynamistress, which we cannot activate due to having no cards in our hand. So, that's unfortunately how this duel went down. But yeah, it's a little unfortunate. It could have been definitely a little bit different if I had used... if I would have not chunk blocked when I shouldn't have, because I could have kept extra life points. But you can't change the past. I was so close. He was at 325 life points. But definitely the numbers were a little bit weird there. So I kind of appreciate that. I think it's really cool looking, but a lot of people really don't like it because they don't like doing the math. But I think it looks really cool. Anyways, he goes... I opt for him to go first. He summons Border. There can be only one, and a Cosmic set face down. And I just go ahead and do the obvious thing and just set 4. He goes ahead and Cosmics in the end phase. Irrespectable, makes sense. Then the Border is going to go ahead and attack. And I go ahead and Dynamistress it. Then he goes for a Gizmek, which I'm going to let go through. And he's going to hit me for 2450, which is okay. Then in the main phase 2, he sets Waking the Dragon. And in the end phase, I go ahead and Heavy Storm Duster as back row. So... I chained the Dynamistress as well to it, and he uses Waking to summon Naturia Exterio. So, yeah, kind of a dumb choice on his part, because I can just make Anomalocaris and pop this, which is exactly what I do here. So I go Swap Frog, send Swap, banish the Swap for Ronin, and overlay all 3 into Anomalocaris, and I use the Anomalocaris to pop the Naturia Exterio. Just pretty obvious. I don't know. And then he goes ahead and he activates Dark Ruler No More that he drew for his turn. I go ahead and I chain my Morella, and then after that's done resolving, I go ahead and I chain Anomalocaris to pop the Gizmek. So, this is an interesting play because neither player can activate monster effects in response to this card's activation. So what I decide to do to play around this specific clause right here that says this card's activation is I chain the Morella, obviously. It doesn't do anything in this case. It's not going to, it's going to be, I don't have any Paleos in grave. It's just, it's just kind of there. Then I can chain the Anomalocaris to that because, sure, I can't activate monster effects in response to Dark Ruler, but I sure can activate them in response to Morella. So that's what I do. I activate it in response to Morella, and I pop Gizmek Orochi. He says I can't do that, and then he finally just gave up, and I'm like, I'm responding to Morella, not Dark Ruler, and he finally just gave up and was like, okay. He banishes 8 cards off of Gizmek's effect, and then I go ahead and I hit this with a strike, and I send the Spiritual Swords off of the Morella just for later turns so I can survive. And then he's going to go ahead and summon Eater of Millions here, the last card in his hand. Such a powerful card, and unfortunately it was the last card, so it's really rough. It does have 2200 attack, so it's not going to... it's going to have to banish here. And I know Anomalocaris isn't affected by monster effects, but I did let the Dark Ruler resolve, so my Anomalocaris is technically negated. Passing his turn back to me, I draw a Ronin Totem for turn, and I can go ahead and summon the Ronin Totem, banish the Swap Frog, and I decide here... He goes for a Gizmek, banishing 8 cards to summon it. And then I decide to go here for a Toad, and I decide to put in defense mode, and I pass my turn. In the standby phase, I decide to go ahead for a Swap Frog summon off of the Toad, because if I decide to go for the Dupe Frog, he can definitely play around it by just banishing it with Eater, so I won't get any sort of floating effect. So I decided the Swap Frog to send the an extra frog from deck is probably the best option. I definitely should have sent Dupe Frog, I believe, in this case. Instead, I just didn't because I'm kind of dumb. Or no, I do send the Dupe Frog, actually. That was my bad. I do send the Dupe Frog, because the 2 Renons were actually attached to the Toad. So I do send the Dupe Frog here. That was my mistake. He goes into battle phase, and he goes ahead and he declares an attack on my Toad, which I let go through, and then I can use the Toad's effect to add Run into the grave. I do that instead of adding Toad to the extra deck because I think that I'm going to start making Link plays here. Instead, I can survive off of the some other monsters in my extra deck instead of just Toad. Plus, Toad's not like super important here. Then he goes ahead and he attacks my Swap Frog with Eater, which I just let banish. That's fine. And in the main phase 2, he sets the Pot of Desires, which is okay because he can't activate it, obviously. And I set the Heavy Storm Duster and pass my turn. So he goes into battle phase and he hits me for 2450. Which I actually decide to go ahead and Spiritual Swords so I don't lose this game. So I take no damage. Passing it back to me, I go ahead and I draw a Solemn Judgment. And then I can go ahead and use the Heavy Storm Duster to pop the Pot of Desires here. And special summon back the Paleo Dynamistress. So I definitely I misplay here, and I will fully admit it right now. Now that I'm looking back at the footage, this clause on Heavy Storm Duster, you cannot conduct your battle phase the turn this card is activated. I do conduct my battle phase this turn. That is my mistake. Realistically, I could have just activated this in the end phase of my opponent's turn, and it should have been the same outcome. So it doesn't really change anything, I don't believe, but it definitely is a factor to consider. I will fully admit that I did play through my battle phase, and I shouldn't have. I didn't, I forgot that this condition existed on the Heavy Storm Duster. It's just something that almost never comes up, but if I could have activated on my opponent's end phase, I definitely would have done. It would have been the same thing, so. Ronan's going to go ahead and banish the Dupe Frog, special summoning the Ronan back from the grave, and I can overlay it into a copy of Opabina. Next, I can use Opabina to go ahead and search for the Dynamistress, and I can use Dynamistress to banish the Gizmek Orochi. So, I guess it doesn't really matter what I banish here, because if I destroy the Gizmek Orochi, it doesn't matter because he only has 7 cards left in deck anyways, so it's not going to matter. But, I go ahead and I special back the Morella. And then I misclick here, add it to hand, but it should be banished because I'm going to link summon it with it and Opabina into a Cerberus, and I pop the Eater of Millions. So this battle phase here doesn't matter because it's literally just me attacking for 1600 damage, plus it doesn't matter in the long run, and I'll show you why. So he goes for a Pot of Extravagance to try and draw some cards. That's fine, he's going to banish 6, draw 2. He draws into a Cosmic as well as a Lightning. He had a Lightning Storm from previous, so a Dark Ruler and a Cosmic, which don't do anything. So he's going to Lightning Storm my Cerberus and pass his turn. I draw into a Dupe Frog. I just decide to set and pass. He draws into a Gizmek Orochi. Doesn't do anything. He only has 3 cards left in deck. I draw into a Soul Drain, which I set, and in the end phase, he activates Cosmic Cyclone to banish the Soul Drain. During his turn, he goes ahead and draws into There Can Be Only One, sets it face down, because it can't do anything, and I draw into a Crackdown, and this is basically the card that seals the fate of this duel. Regardless of whatever he draws for the rest of this duel, if he has a Gren Maju left in his deck, I can go ahead and Crackdown take it, and at that point, he has to use another Gren Maju to kill it, or he has to draw specifically like a Gren Maju, like two Gren Majus in a row, but even then, it's not going to matter. So, yeah. So I pass my turn, and he draws into another Gizmek Orochi, which does nothing, and he passes it back to me. I draw for turn, drawing Solemn Strike, setting a card, and passing my turn. And the last card in his deck is Lightning Storm. So obviously he can clear the back row. He could clear the back row. If one of these were a Gren Maju, he could kill the Dupe Frog, but even then he has no cards left in deck, so it's not gonna matter. So he just goes ahead and scoops up the game because the next turn I'm just gonna pass and deck him out. So that was it for this match. I hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely kind of like an anticlimactic ending to this, but a win's a win. So, you know, next episode, I'm not exactly sure what we will play, but yeah, if you guys do want to see the Paleo Frog combos updated for Master Rule 5, do let me know, and I will make a video on that. So, with all of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in a couple days.